and welcome back to Nerd News Today Toy Fair 2021. Now, a lot of you folks who are regulars to the channel know that I've become very obsessed about Japanese wrestling figures recently, and more so, I started the series all about the Kara Pro figures. I'm super duper deep into these things, and part of the reason to blame for that is the person we're talking with today. That's Adam McFarlane, also known as JunkShopDog on Instagram. JSD, I'm gonna probably just call you that today. JSD, how's it going today, mate?
Yeah, good, good. How are you?
I'm doing all right. So you are in Sydney, Australia, correct?
That's right. Sydney, Australia, other side of the world. So might even start the conversation by thanking you and all of the Junk Shop Dog customers for your understanding, because I know postage and the time to send things aren't very cheap. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you for what you're doing, especially because I mean, right now we're talking about you guys have like wildfires going on in Australia, right? So I mean, you're dealing with that as well. So you're mailing toys, dealing with that. I can't imagine it's very easy right now.
It's okay. It's on the other side of the country, and it's a big country. So we're not in any danger over here. So we're good as gold.
That's good to hear. So let's just jump right into things here because I know it's morning for you. As you can see, there's your morning coffee. It's like nighttime for me almost. JSD, first question here: what was your favorite toy growing up as a kid?
Well, I actually didn't really collect wrestling toys as a kid. There was a couple of bootlegs and LJNs floating around, but my favourite toys as a kid were the Playmates, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. They got worn out pretty well as a kid, and also the real Ghostbusters figures. They were the two that I collected as a kid. Had a couple of He-Man figures as well. So I was pretty well versed in the popular toy lines of the time, but actually didn't get into wrestling figures until I was an adult.
And when we're talking about wrestling figures, are we talking about like American stuff like Jakks and Mattel, or are we talking about the Japanese stuff since you've got so much of that too?
No, I actually was first taken as a teenager, catching up on all of this old wrestling that I hadn't seen. Not so much old at the time, but the '90s Coliseum videos, and I saw all these ads for the Hasbro figures, and I was just taken by them immediately. The cartoony style and the actions and the wrestlers that they had on the roster. So that was what first kind of caught my attention. But even then, they were well and truly out of print. So it wasn't until I was an adult that I started to collect those. As an aside, um, in 2007, before I'd really dug into wrestling figure collecting at all, I went to Japan, and just as a souvenir, I went to the New Japan store and got a Kara Pro articulated Jushin Liger. So that just kind of sat on display for the best part of a decade before I really understood the depth of Japanese figures.
And I'm glad that you do now because you're definitely one of the experts out there about this topic, and you're my hookup now. I'm pretty much buying most of my stuff from you. So yeah, let's actually talk a little bit about Japanese wrestling figures. And you are now a toy maker as well as a retailer, but let's talk about just first, essentially your bread and butter at Junk Shop Dog, and that's reselling all these older Japanese figures. So there's a few different types here. There's some confusion over things too. So let's just talk about the typical figure, which is Kara Pro or Magura House. Can you kind of give us a definition of these types of figures and I guess kind of try as best as you can to explain why there's so many different types of these types of one style of figure?
Where do we start?
It's a loaded question, isn't it?
Yeah, and probably just because of the enthusiasm we have for them, there's so many things to kind of discuss. But I guess you would say from a scale point of view, they're slightly larger than a Hasbro or a Galoob. They basically only articulate at the arms in for the most part, but I guess the fun part about that is the arms actually come off. You can pop them off, and in some cases, the Kara Pros, like for example, a Jinsei Shinzaki or even Bruiser Brody, they come with different versions of the arms, so you can pop them off and on. Um, so they're a line that lasted for about 4 years, from about 2000 to 2004. Um, I'd say for the most part was a New Japan line because they ran alongside with the wrestlers of that particular time in New Japan. Um, the and then there was also some legends, All Japan, Anita, Tenru, and then there was the Mogra House. I've asked this question many times and still not got a straight answer, but I'm pretty confident that they were all made by the same people because you see the Mogra House label on other merchandise and other figures. So it seems like it was just a Cara Pro product, so a character product with a different label on them because most of the Pro Wrestling Noah figures had that Mogra House label on them, including some soft vinyl and other bits and pieces.
Yeah, it's a little confusing sometimes because you'll see those logos side by side or sometimes independent of each other, but it's essentially all the same figure. So that's thanks for kind of clearing that one up because that's always confused me about these toys too.
Yeah, and Pro Wrestling Noah was such a big commodity at the time that they could have done their own, and I guess it set them apart from New Japan, which was then number one competitor at the time.
So in terms of Japanese wrestling figures, that's the Kara Pro series. There's also things like mini big heads. There's the How figures, which are like caricature versions of these wrestlers and MMA people. But the one we're going to talk about today are the ones that essentially you're making now as a toy maker, and that would be the Popey figures. And Popey wrestling figures are probably the earliest mass-released wrestling figure ever in the world, and they're really cool toys. So I guess let's first, if you don't mind, give us a little history lesson about Popey figures.
They're in a style that is very typical of the time. So I'd say probably the other example that's most prevalent in Japan that we've seen are the Ultraman figures. So they're done in a very similar size. They're in the soft vinyl style, and if you ever come across these, you'll see that they have the same arms out, fists down kind of style. So it was very popular with kids around that time. It was definitely not a collector line. It was for children, and it basically captured a lot of the top wrestlers of the day. 9 out of the 10 were foreigners. Yeah, it was basically, yeah. It sat alongside the Tiger Mask figures, which Poppy also did. Which, if you saw them on card, um, you would see that the card design is very similar, just a different color. The style is the same. So it was a style that was being done by several toy makers and across a number of lines at the time.
And now in 2020 and 2021, you have launched the World of Pro Wrestling Sofubi Series 2, basically continuing in that same vein of what was started many decades ago and continuing that line, continuing that lineage of toys. And the first figure in that line was Bruiser Brody. And in fact, you're wearing one of the hats you made also for that figure, the King Kong Bruiser Brody hat, which is really cool. Tell me about what it's like making a toy first off and then trying to make a toy during a pandemic.
It's exciting. It's frustrating. It's a it's a whole gauntlet of emotions, I guess. But we were really lucky in that much of the production of our figure was after the biggest wave of coronavirus had hit China. So a lot of the initial work, the finding the toy maker. Because we were starting from scratch, and whilst there's been plenty of people that have helped us find out information about the toy game, there's a lot that you have to do yourself and find out yourself. And so the finding of the manufacturer, the initial 3D imaging and that kind of thing, thankfully was done when a lot of workers in China were working from home. And by the time we got to the point where we're moving into prototypes and actual figure production, we were lucky enough that the factories had opened again.
And it's a good thing they did because you guys got these figures out real quick. I got them and we reviewed them on the channel. So if you're not familiar with them, here's a link to go check them out. But yeah, the Bruiser Brody, really awesome looking toy. It just fits in so perfectly with the original figures. Not that I have any because that's a price point I can't touch, but I would imagine they fit in very well with them. So yeah, I'd like to ask you what it's like working with the family of Frank Goodish because this is an officially licensed figure as well.
It was an absolute pleasure, to be honest. Mrs. Goodish has been fantastic from the start, and we did know her before. You know, making the jump to making this figure, we'd spoken back and forth a little bit, just you know, with no intent to do anything commercially. But once she got the idea of how much Bruiser Brody um, merchandise had been made in Japan without a license, uh, all of the um, all of the Carapros that had been made, the Medicoms had been done without her permission. So with us thinking of new ways to grow what Junk Shop Dog is, and he fit in. It was a perfect combination of everything that made it so. But by the same token, even to this day, she's just a lovely person to talk to and to work alongside, and just yeah, I'm just so glad that she's done such a great job in continuing the legacy, and she's so open to ideas, and yeah, I can't speak highly enough of her.
And I'm glad you mentioned that about the fact that Medicom did their own thing. I didn't realize they did that unlicensed. So you're actually doing it the right way, which is really great.
Sorry, Medicom.
Yeah. Sorry, not sorry. But so with terms of the figures now, I know you've got some that you're working on. Maybe we'll talk about those a little bit later on. But are the plans to consider doing any modern characters, or is it going to all be purely retro wrestlers?
The only qualifier we would put on any figures that we would make in the future is that they've wrestled a match in Japan. Because ultimately, what we would like to do, as much as possible, if not 100% of the time, is to capture the gear, the attire that they wore whilst they wrestled in Japan. And obviously, with these being done in a Japanese style, we want these to appeal to Japanese wrestling fans. So if the person hasn't wrestled in Japan, well, it quite possibly limits the appeal to Japanese fans.
Now, will you ever try and pursue any characters who had already been made? I know some folks, like the Funks and the Briscoes, maybe you might be able to reach out to those people still. Would you want to like do them again, but in your style, or are you going to just be focused on making people who never had a figure?
Well, we don't want to limit ourselves. I'd say never. And yeah, keep an eye out on what we're doing in the next couple of months, because you'll probably get an answer to that.
So JSD, we're talking about Bruiser Brody. It's an amazing, excellent figure. You get another variant of that color as well. So you've got the normal flesh version, and there's the metal version as well. Really wonderful figures. But can you tell us who's next?
We can very soon. We hate to be too mysterious, but I think it's not because we're trying to be mysterious or cagey. We're just really excited about the way that we'll be launching the next three figures, and it's just making sure that we can do it in a way that involves all of the either the wrestlers themselves or the families of. So stay tuned to our Instagram, and we'll post a very exciting announcement video, but we'll also use it as a way to launch our YouTube channel as well, and you'll see on there first who we have planned for the next three figures.
So you've got Bruiser Brody, and unfortunately he's no longer with us. But assuming that you do more figures of more characters who are still with us, is there the possibility for making these figures come with like autograph packaging that are actually hand signed by the wrestlers?
Absolutely, we'll leave that with the wrestlers in terms of whether they want us to sell them in that way. But I think you'll see other wrestlers come out soon enough, or they're definitely in the works for our line, where they'll sell them through their own websites. So that'll be an avenue for them to to personalize those pieces as well. So the short answer is yes, and yeah, just stay tuned to the next string of releases and subsequent releases to see how we will be able to do that.
So for folks who want to follow Junk Shop Dog, who want to follow the progress of the figures, follow more reveals, and ideally buy some Kara Pro figures and everything else that you're selling over there, how can folks do that?
At JunkShopDog on Instagram, JunkShopDog on Facebook, and at JunkShopDog on Twitter. We've been lucky enough to keep them all uniform. And yeah, drop us a message. We're always happy to help in any way, shape, or form with the work on the new figures and vintage being a fairly fickle beast. We don't have a lot of Cara Pros left, so please get in while you can, and we'll if we can't find them, or if we know that they're around elsewhere, because there's plenty of other people jumping in and selling Cara Pros at the moment. So we'll try and steer them in the right direction, or even just have a bit of a yarn about the line and try and help people learn more, because it's such a mysterious and difficult to research line that we're learning new things every day, and hopefully we can impart that excitement for both the existing Japanese figure lines, all of them really, from bull marks to today, and chat a little bit about our own figures, and hopefully people will get interested in those as a result.
Well, you've been super helpful whenever I've messaged you about asking for history about figures or just trying to understand how all the lines worked, all that kind of stuff. Because yeah, these figures are very mysterious. And again, congratulations on launching the figures. Yeah, Bruiser Brody is amazing. I really can't wait to see the quality of the next ones because yeah, you can really only go up from here. It just keeps getting better. So, Junk Shop Dog, thank you so much for chatting with us today.
Thanks for having me.
So everybody go ahead, follow Junk Shop Dog on Instagram. We'll have links below to where you can do that, as well as to where you can check out the store to buy not just the figure, but also the hat that you're seeing on Mr. JSD today as well, because that's also available. It's a nice hat too. I should have gotten one for myself. Why didn't I do that? So everybody stick around because there's more nerd news today. Toy Fair 2021 coming right up.